Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. Welcome to another episode of insightful and sometimes unconventional and or eccentric stories about mothers. Or not only just mothers, but female influences, maternal representation in our life, no matter who you get that from or lucky enough to get that from. For the most part, does society have mothers on a pedestal? Are moms, anyone who's a mom, always supposed to get everything right? When speaking to potential guests, I ask them, are you who you are today because of or in spite of your mother? My guest contributes the success of her #1 cookbook podcast, Cookery by the Book, to her mom's lack of skill in the kitchen. Talk about finding inspiration. And the foodies, any foodies out there listening, you have to check out Suzy's podcast, Cookery by the Book. I'm really happy to have Suzy Chase with me on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thank you so much for having me, Jackie. Isn't that funny that my #1 cookbook podcast is a hit in spite of my mother?
Yeah, well, and it's a little bit of both, right? Because of her, right? Or in spite of her. And you went out and found this. You went out and found this. Something inspired you. So how about, I always like to begin so we know who we're talking about. What is your mom's name or how did you refer or call to your mom?
Well, I called her mom, but her name was Marilyn.
You grew up in the Midwest?
Yes, I grew up in Prairie Village, Kansas. And my mother was born in Jefferson City, Missouri in 1929.
Okay, so you lived your life in Kansas? Because now you are speaking to us from New York. So
I moved out of Kansas City in 1996 to move to New York City.
Your mom, tell us a little bit about her childhood and her upbringing that you know of.
Well, she was an only child, grew up during the Great Depression to, I would say, upper class, waspy parents. They doted on her. She was a ballerina very young. Then she went to the University of Missouri. She was a cheerleader. She was, I think, everything they wanted in a child. She was the prototype female, gorgeous, tap danced, etc. For that time, she was like what females were, I think, striving to be.
Did your mom have a cotillion?
No, she didn't.
Did not.
But
okay.
That's hilarious that you asked that. No, her mother was a great cook. My mother was actually a really good cook. But in the 70s, a lot of our moms had to get jobs. My mom divorced my father. She was busy. She became a really great real estate agent, and she just didn't have time to cook anymore. Like so many mothers, that was like the dawn of the frozen dinner.
Yeah. So how old was she when she got married? And did she marry a childhood sweetheart?
She married my dad, who was on the football team at the University of Missouri. So they were like the perfect couple. She was the cheerleader. And she got married at 21. She left college to marry my father.
Interesting. And so, so continue. You mentioned they divorced.
Yes.
And she was on her own.
Yes, and she was on her own. I had 3 brothers. The youngest was 10 years older than I was. And then the next was 12 years older than I was, and the next was 14 years older. So you can see where that's going. I was a little unexpected, I gathered. And
oh my gosh, she must have been so overwhelmed. Taking care of 4 kids on her own, trying to build her career. That's a lot for one person to handle.
At this point, my brother was starting to hallucinate, and this was the 70s, so they didn't know what mental illness was. So while my mom was trying to make a living doing real estate, she was also running around trying to figure out what was wrong with my brother, who was 10 years older than I was. So I was 7, he was 17. So dinner was basically every night. Dinner was steak and potatoes and a salad. You know, it was the Midwest. And oftentimes we'd go out to dinner. But there wasn't, from my mother, there wasn't any formal, hey, come into the kitchen. Let's learn how to, I'll teach you how to make bread. Nothing like that.
Let's bake cookies.
Yes.
Okay. So did your dad play a role? Was he a part of your lives? Did he help your mom out?
He moved, he was transferred to Dallas. He was a very wealthy man, but he held a lot of the money from my mom. So he was very angry. I think that's why my mom divorced him. He was not very helpful to her. He just, in terms of like my brother, he said he just needed to go into the army to straighten up, that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay, so your mom's a survivor. Regardless of how she was pampered, right, as a little girl, she was cared for. She was the main attraction, right? She stood tall. She was responsible, and what a wonderful role model.
She was tough as nails. Because this all came to a great surprise. I mean, my parents had people over all the time. My mom played tennis, and then she got divorced, and my brother went downhill. And I'm sure it was all new to her. And she had such strength going through this.
That's hard, especially when you're the high school sweethearts, like the king and the queen of the prom, right? And then it's starting to go south. So,
yes.
And society has you in that little, up on that pedestal, speaking of pedestals, the perfect couple. Wow. So she's busy. There's the age difference between you and your siblings. So were you a latchkey kid? Were you on your own?
Pretty much, because my mom she would always say, you're fine, Andy's not. So everything, like, no one really paid attention to me because everyone was paying attention, like trying to figure out what was wrong with my brother. Right. So in a sense, I was a latchkey kid, definitely.
Well, that's hard though, when they're not, all the attention goes to somebody else, right? As a little kid, that's tough.
Yeah, it was very tough. I missed a lot of school. My brother would keep me up late at night reading the Bible. It was horrific. And then my mom put him in the state mental hospital. So she would take me to see him, and I was 9 or 10. And years later, I went to a grief counselor, and they said, you weren't supposed to be in that mental hospital. So
that's a lot for a little girl.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
But I feel like I was there as odd as it sounds. I think I was strength for my mother. I was a young child, but I went through everything with her. I went down, when he was arrested for sleeping out on the street, I'd have to go down to the police headquarters to. Like, my mom brought me everywhere.
Well, you were her support system. She leaned on you, man. You must have grown up pretty fast.
I did.
Wow. Well, there's advantages to that and some disadvantages, I'm sure, as you're learning or learned, right?
Totally. I thank my mom every day that I was able to up and move to New York City. wanted to become a I was a cookbook publicist in Kansas City, and I was also on the radio. That I want to talk to you about that.
Sure.
And I just up and moved to New York City, and I talked to a PR company, and I said, "You need to do cookbook publicity." They thought I was crazy. They said, "No, we do regular book publicity." I said, "No, there's a whole niche for cookbook publicity." But if I hadn't grown up with that tough mom who could conquer anything, I never, ever would have made that leap.
The trickle-down effect, or osmosis. Yes. You watch and learn.
Basically, it kind of is osmosis, though. It kind of gets in there.
Yeah, well, she was fighting for your brother, so that was a natural instinct that you held on to. Wow, that's pretty great.
Right.
She's taught you a lot.
In terms of radio, she was so busy. And I don't know about you, but I spent so much time listening to the radio as a kid.
Yeah, we grew up on the radio for sure.
I would say I'd be upset about something my brother did, and I'd yell, "Mom, I can't sleep." And she'd say, "Turn on your radio." So I would turn on. Larry King was on the radio at night. I would listen. I would try to get a Chicago radio station in my bed in the middle of the night in Kansas City. And that radio was my friend.
Yeah, your lifeline.
Yep.
It's unfortunate, your circumstances at the time, but I do love the fact that your mom said, turn on the radio, because that's the power of the medium that I think we have this mutual respect for. And one of the main reasons I don't do video for this podcast. But I guess she was trying to help you find something to distract you and take your mind off things, especially when it's late at night and you're tired and your brother wasn't well. Is Marilyn, is your mom still with us?
No, she passed away in 2008.
I'm so sorry. And she was still in Kansas?
Yep. I was in New York City. I had just had a baby with my husband, and I said, let's move back and be close to my mom. We moved back, and 2 months later, first of all, I said, Mom, you have a really bad cough. Let's go check it out. And it turned out to be stage 4 lung cancer.
Oh my gosh. She never took care of herself.
She was so angry with me. It was almost like I had given her the cancer. I can't tell you how mad she was with me. I made her go to the doctor, and we uncovered this death sentence. And
it was your fault.
It was my fault. And she turned on me. She took me out of the will. She gave my childhood home to a, quote, good friend. And it was awful. And that's when my husband said, Suzy, your mother was never a good mother.
Do you believe that?
After looking back, now I'm a mother to a 15-year-old. And looking back on it, she was awful. But I clung to her with all my life. I loved her. She was so perfect to me. I loved her. I clung to her. But she was the worst mother.
Oh my gosh, I wasn't expecting this conversation. So I don't mean to laugh. Oh my gosh.
No,
I'm
she
so
was
sorry. This is hard. And then, oh my goodness. That's what this podcast is about. We keep moving forward in life, regardless of how horrific our childhood was, how horrific our mother was. But it's proof that we can change our lives. We can move forward without keeping that chain around our neck.
Well, and it's taboo. In the past few years, I've been telling people I had the worst mother, because you're not supposed to say that. That's not okay to say in our society. but it's true. I am who I am in spite of my mother. My oldest brother, Steve, who was 14 years older, had colon cancer in 2002. He was on his deathbed in the hospital, and he told my mom not to come and visit him.
Because he already knew that
He already knew.
she was kind of toxic.
Yeah.
Are any of your siblings still with us?
No, no, none of them are. My brother, the oldest brother, died of colon cancer in 2002.
Okay.
My middle brother, Jeff, was murdered in Kansas City in 2001. And my youngest brother with schizophrenia killed himself in 2011 after my mom died.
Oh, so she basically was there for him. She
Yeah,
kept him alive.
she did. She indeed, yeah.
Wow, amazing. And your dad?
He passed away in 2015 of a heart attack.
So is that freeing for you? Kind of I mean, I'm sure it's emotionally heavy in your heart, but is this a new beginning for you and your child and your family, and you can now go forward standing taller?
You know, I remember the first time feeling really carefree. Like I talk about people, I hear people talk about when they're around their family, they feel at home and there's a hominess and carefree. And I never had that. The first time I ever felt carefree was probably the first time I moved away to New York City. So I've had this sort of free feeling for a while now.
Well,
Because I got out of the Midwest.
right. And you got to be on your own and figure out who you are.
Yes,
And no better place to do that than New York City.
exactly. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Suzy, Chase, this is crazy. Well, I commend you for turning your life around. Do you think of it that way, or finding the positivity that's out there in the world? I mean, it's hard to come by for a lot of people. And was it your husband, your future husband at the time, that turned things around for you, or you did this all on your own?
I honestly, I did it all on my own. And I think because I got my mother's strength. I had a grief counselor after she died say to me, I can't believe you're not sitting on the street shooting up somewhere after everything you've been through. And I said, I know. I'm a good mother. I'm a good wife. I have an amazing life here in New York City. And I attribute all of that to my mother's relentless strength. And she always said, you're going to get up tomorrow and you're going to smile and it's going to be a great day, as she was gritting her teeth.
Well, I guess she did that a lot. She had to do that for society too. She didn't, right? Did she play the game of everything is perfect in my house, or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were the beautiful, waspy, upper middle class family you never, ever would have ever known. Never.
What was going on behind closed doors?
Yeah. And that's another thing people don't talk about with their mom, is what was going on behind closed doors. So I really, for your listeners, I really want to give people, tell people that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to shed some light on things that might not be pretty.
Oh my gosh, we're just human, you know?
Yeah.
Pretty and perfect really shouldn't have a place in our lives as far as, you know, parameters of, because then it's just not realistic. It's not, who cares about perfect?
Right.
I'm not perfect, so I don't have any, I don't aspire to be perfect. because I'm human. And I'm a mom, and I certainly wasn't perfect. And you know what? Being human and imperfect go hand in hand in my book. And man, there are situations that I wish I had handled differently with my boys. But you know what? For the most part, between luck and a great husband and two wonderful boys, we've made it through some tough stuff, Teenage stuff can be hard.
Yeah. Yes.
And these kids are going through an awful lot these days. There's a lot more on their mind than there ever should be,
Right. Yeah, I feel for these kids.
So let's talk about how did you get this idea, the cookbook idea? You said your mom inspired you, but tell us about your podcast.
So, as I said, I was on the radio in Kansas City, and I also did cookbook publicity. And then in a little background, in 2005, I started podcasting with a podcast called The Groove Radio. And it's basically my love letter to the soul music mixtape. And then 2014, I was looking around and I thought, I want to do another podcast. I love this and it's catching on. And so I love radio, and I knew that people loved cookbooks after being in the cookbook world. So I thought, gosh, there were food podcasts, but there were no podcasts devoted solely to cookbooks. So I thought, gosh, I'd love to have those deep conversations about food and culture surrounding a cookbook author's cookbook on a podcast. So that's really how it came about. Also, I was, raising a young boy. So I make something out of each cookbook, probably twice a week. So my husband and my son were able to enjoy these great recipes out of the cookbooks.
Do they keep a sheet with a thumbs up or thumbs down?
No, they're so sweet.
Mom's attempts. That one, because I've listened to some of the podcasts and your podcast, and it's really great because there's so much behind especially with food, right? I mean, and often it has to do, it's emotional, I think. A lot of people cook with a lot of emotion. But that's what was fun about listening to your stories, is that you hear what inspired people or what moves them. And so much of cooking is like a chemistry, and it just is really fun. It's really a great show.
And I love to hear, since I didn't get it at home, I love to hear these cookbook authors talk about how their grandmother, spent so much time with them in the kitchen. Their mother taught them how to bake sourdough bread. For me, these stories are healing.
Oh, very much so. Food in general has many healing properties. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, I mean, some people don't have a good relationship with food, which is really unfortunate. But my experience, our meals were spectacular. I don't remember my mom, because I'm the youngest of 7, I don't remember her ever using a cookbook. But I guess by the time I came around, at that point, she was just cooking everything. She was a phenomenal cook.
Oh, man.
And the 9 of us sitting down at the dinner table was it wasn't just about the food, it was about the flowers on the table and the candles and the lighting, and we sat for hours and talked. So food for my family is just a magical experience with all those memories. It's really very special to me.
Oh, that's amazing. See, I would have come over.
Anytime. And I often speak to my friends from high school and before high school saying, I remember having dinner at your house with the candles and the flowers on the table and sitting for hours. Meanwhile, we were like, can we go out? All our friends were out, right? But my family lived overseas for a number of years. I'm Italian, but I was born in Spain. So we would eat dinner at 8, 9 o'clock, and it would last for a good hour or two sometimes. And all my friends would be like, can you come out? Can you come out? And I'd be like, no, I'm eating dinner. And then, the friends that were able to, spend time with us and have dinner with us, that's what they remember most. these amazing meals.
Oh, that was so
and the
different. That
discussion. Yeah, it
back
was
in the
very-
day, everyone ate dinner at 5.
Yeah, so
and watched the evening news. That's such a great memory.
I tell you, it's a movie in my head. The most amazing memories. So yeah, so food is really important, and I'm hoping now in these next upcoming years, because my schedule's changed a bit, that I'm going to be able to start cooking more, because it's just so much. It can be fun. It can be fun if you have the time to do it. It's not fun when you have to rush and get something on the table in 5 minutes.
Yeah, amen.
All right, Suzy Chase, it's been a surprise hearing your stories, but I'm really glad that you shared the story with us. And Marilyn, I hope, is in a really good place and a new beginning, as all of your brothers. And you're in New York City, and New York City's going to take good care of you and your family, I'm sure.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jackie.
You bet. And don't forget, Cookery by the Book. You have is it the Groove Radio?
Yeah, thegrooveradio.com. And I just launched a new companion podcast to Cookery by the Book called Decorating by the Book. If you're into decorating books, I interview the greatest decorating book authors.
Very good. Suzy Chase, thanks for joining me on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thank you.